This week on Wealth Track, tracking the treasures to be found in the alternative energy revolution. Financial thought leader and energy analyst Bill Paul leads the hunt for major energy opportunities. Next on Consuelo Mack, Wealth Track.
The company you keep is also the company we keep. Together, we help provide a lifetime of guaranteed income and investment solutions.
Additional funding provided by Luma Sales, investors seeking exceptional opportunities globally. Research affiliates, an efficient index for an inefficient market. Wintergreen, your home for global value. Rosalind P. Walter, and the Dreamin Foundation.
Hello and welcome to this Financial Thought Leader edition of Wealth Track. I'm Consuelo Mack. What is the next big thing? Which industry do government leaders and executives around the world embrace universally? Which businesses do companies as diverse as Microsoft, Google, General Electric, and Berkshire Hathaway think could be bigger than the internet? The answer is green, clean, alternative energy. Investment in it is exploding both from the private and the public sector, and it is one of the specialties of our financial thought leader guest, energy analyst and consultant Bill Paul. As Paul, a former energy and environmental reporter for the Wall Street Journal, puts it, the math behind the demand for alternative energy is simple. The global population is expected to grow from 7 billion to 9 billion over the next 2 to 3 decades. The vehicles they drive are expected to double from 1 billion to 2 billion. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, global energy consumption is estimated to grow by 49% between now and 2035, fueled largely by the growing affluence of citizens in India and China and other developing countries who want electricity to power a higher standard of living. As Paul says, they are also going to want clean air for their families. And no population or government wants to be dependent upon energy from potentially unstable or hostile places. Now, unfortunately, they are going to have to be for the foreseeable future. The exploding demand for energy means that fossil fuels will continue to provide the bulk of the world's power needs, supplemented increasingly by alternative energy. Clean energy is expected to be the fastest growing source of power over the next 25 years. Right now, alternative energy, those are renewables such as wind, solar, water, and geothermal, account for about 10% of the world's energy. Add nuclear to that mix and you get 15%. By 2035, it is estimated that from that small base, renewables will grow to 14% of the world's energy source. With nuclear, it grows to 20%. So what does this growth mean for investors in an industry with a history of volatile and disappointing results? According to Bill Paul, alternative energy now represents the greatest economic and investment opportunity of our lifetime. I asked him why.
Think of the early 1990s when the computer age and the internet age were just starting to come into view for the general public. And think of the longevity and how much money people made all over the place. Think about how Clinton basically rode to victory on a second term by propping up the economy, all on that huge revolution. We are about to experience something very similar with energy. Energy has gone pretty much unchanged for 80, 90 years. If you look back at the 1920s, you see pictures of poles and wires for electricity. You see people pumping gas into a car. All of that is about to change for many different reasons. But we are literally looking at the next 20 to 30 years where trillions of dollars will be made by investors in literally 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 different companies that will come public, of which maybe about 500 to 750 are already public, but there are many, many more in the pipeline.
So, Bill, we've had the promise of alternative energy as a great investment now for a couple of decades, and it's had an ebb and flow. But what's really different? I mean, has there been some sort of a tipping point reached that makes alternative energy now that we can kind of depend on it as an investment vehicle?
Several tipping points.
Okay.
First of all, you have to get out of thinking like an American investor and think like a global investor. The world has embraced alternative energy over the last 5 years, especially in Europe and especially in China, Japan, and South Korea. They are driving this revolution even as we sit in the back seat trying to catch up. That's one thing that has changed. Another thing that has changed is the environmental movement, which is no longer going to put up with carbon dioxide emissions from coal-fired power plants. So we have to find a brand new way of making almost 50% of our power in this country. Another thing that has changed is energy security. Under Bush, with Iraq, with Afghanistan, the notion of having oil cut off. People can no longer afford to depend on foreign imports of oil. At the same time, we are seeing the major oil companies, ExxonMobil, Chevron, and the rest, they're running out of oil. The world's not running out of oil, but they are running out of the oil they own. That puts them in a very dicey position where they're going to have to go hat in hand to Arab countries to get their future oil. They are hedging their bets by moving into alternative energy. That's another huge reason. What we're looking at is political pressure and financial realization that the world has to change in the way it powers itself.
Let me follow up on one of your points. You said that the U.S. is not the driver in alternative energy. So what's happened? Why is the U.S. not the driver in the alternative energy industry?
We can't get an energy policy. That's not new news. We've gone 4 or 5 presidents, all of whom have said, we got to have a national energy policy. We still don't have one. Lo and behold, China has a national energy policy. South Korea has one. Japan has one. The European Union has formed a collective one. We are now even seeing national energy strategies coming out of the Middle East. They want to move beyond oil. They want to tap their solar power. Obviously, sitting in a desert, they have tremendous reserves of solar. We are seeing other countries get their act together, even as we at the national level are absolutely incapable of coming together on a strategy that basically we must have if we're going to compete. Let me add that investors should not think that just because Washington is dysfunctional, that we're not seeing the U.S. move ahead. The U.S. is moving ahead at the state level. There are approximately 40 to 45 states now that have what are called renewable portfolio standards. That simply means that utilities must generate a larger and larger percentage of their electricity from renewable power sources like wind, solar, and geothermal. We now also have approximately 25 states which have energy efficiency standards. For example, in Arizona, by 2020, everything will have to be 20% more efficient. Everything that uses electricity is supposed to be 20% more efficient than it is today. 10 years. So at the state level, we are seeing the revolution that we are seeing universally everywhere else except in Washington. These guys just can't get their act together, and they will mess us up. Make no mistake, the jobs are being created. That green job revolution that Mr. Obama talked about, it's kind of come and gone already, and we didn't catch it. We didn't catch that wave. We are also missing out on investment opportunities. Deutsche Bank just put out a report. They have approximately $7 billion total tied up in green energy investments. Guess how much is coming to the United States? $45 million.
Out of $7 billion.
Out of $7 billion. And the guy who runs this said, heck with it, I'm not going to America. I have no idea what those people in Washington are going to do next. I'm going where there's regulatory and legislative certainty that is pushing this revolution. Well, yes, it is the opportunity of a lifetime because we've already set the ground rules for this. And we have hit a point where countries, especially China, have decided there is no turning back. We don't have enough oil to meet our needs. India, the same way. We don't have enough coal or oil to meet our needs. We must depend on these alternative sources.
All right, let's talk about the alternative sources because you just mentioned them. When most people think about alternative energy, they think of wind and solar and geothermal, hydroelectric. But there's another huge area that you've been writing about for years, and it's called the smart grid. And from an investment point of view, that's an area that we should be paying a lot of attention to. So what is the smart grid, first of all?
The smart grid is essentially the heart of, literally the heart of the new energy economy. Without a smart grid, solar, wind, geothermal can't get hooked up into the power grid because the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, and you must have a power grid that can handle these interruptible flows, and hence you must have computer controlled technology installed on the grid to make that happen.
So as these renewables come on stream, 20% of renewable power,
Right.
That you need a smart grid to control the flow of electricity so that we don't get blackouts. And I mean, is that a big part of this?
The key word is called stability.
Stability.
You must maintain the stability of the grid. The utilities are frantic that they will have a grid that is further destabilized by green power sources. So they are, in point of fact, investing billions, some from Washington, much of their own money, which they're charging from ratepayers. At last count, we've probably spent about $150 billion globally to smarten up the grids. And again, this isn't just happening in the US. China's smartening up its grid. Europe is smartening up its grid. Everybody's smartening up their grid. And it's not just to integrate the green power sources into it. It is also because in the US, we currently lose $2 billion a year on power losses. Businesses are very inefficient because the grid system is very inefficient. With this computer-controlled technology, this smart grid, that disappears. Those losses disappear, as do blackouts. If you want to think about something miraculous, think about the thought of a society where you are no longer prone to blackouts. That's 5 to 10 years out because of the smart grid. Now, the smart grid is nothing more visually than what you see today, wires and poles. What you don't see, however, is all of the computer controls, the routers and all of the other devices that are being supplied as we speak by Oracle and Cisco.
And stop there, because what's so interesting is when you think of a grid build out, you think of big industrial manufacturing companies, the GEs or the German Siemens or ABB. But you're saying that in fact that when we think of the huge internet names, Microsoft, Oracle, Cisco, Apple, they're all getting involved in this smart grid as well, and they see it
as well.
And somebody from Microsoft said in one of your reports that he thinks it's going to be bigger than the internet was for Microsoft.
Correct. Most of Silicon Valley sees the smart grid as big or bigger in terms of a revenue generation source than the internet even, which is hard to believe. Think of, frankly, the smart grid as a new internet, a second internet, where you will be communicating just like you do on your wireless cell phone. You will be communicating through something called a smart meter. Well, duh, smart grid needs a smart meter. What is a smart meter? It is a box in your home, which is your old thermostat with a computer brain that allows it to do a lot more. You will now, the consumer, will be in control of how much energy you use. You want to cut your utility bill each month? You can just punch in the right buttons. So the smart meter is the on-site brain. Well, essentially everything becomes a brain, and this entire system gets linked up with wireless communications that communicate in real time from the power plant over the lines into the homes and businesses, back and forth, so that you can much better determine how much power you need to generate, much better determine how much power you really need to use. So on the one end of this, we have energy efficiency, which is a huge part of the alternative energy revolution. And on the other hand, over here, we got all of these power sources, which are the green, the solar and the wind and everything else that will feed in. And in between, we have wires, which we're about to restring a whole lot of wires in this country to make them more efficient. The wires in this country, they're old copper wires. What we're about to see, this is a little inside baseball, but it's aluminum composite core. We're about to take these wires and make them capable of transmitting not just a lot more power, but a lot more data, a lot more things that you think of when you think of the internet, pictures, video, everything. I have a real question in my mind 25, 30 years out, whether or not there will be a battleground between the wires that used to be called the electric system and the wires of the internet. I don't think we need both. I think we're frankly headed to a point where we're going to have too many wires.
Bill, Warren Buffett has even gotten involved in the smart grid. What's he doing with Berkshire Hathaway and the smart grid?
All right, you may remember the publicity that he got when he went to China and picked up, I think, about 20% of a Chinese car company called BYD.
Yes.
BYD makes electric vehicles. Electric vehicles which will be introduced not just in the United States, but essentially worldwide later this fall, but really in 2011. You'll see the Chevrolet Volt and you will see the BYD car. The cool thing that Warren has figured out is that he has taken an interest in a company that does not just know how to build an electric car, but also has been working with the Chinese State Power Authority. So they have been working to make sure that the BYD car can plug into any electric utilities, wires basically. You can go home and plug this thing into a socket. Now, we're still working on this in this country, but the BYD is going to come into this country tailor-made for any idiot like you or me to go to bed at night and plug it in and wake up in the morning and have 40 miles of electric transportation. Warren owns a utility, all right? It's called Mid-American. Warren is, in my mind, going to buy more utilities. He is going to start building a smart grid empire, as if he needs more to his empire. I believe he's got a smart grid empire in the back of his mind. He is going to take those cars and is going to create a revenue source for them. Think about it. Every time you plug in, you're using electricity, which will go to his electric utility. You don't mind because you're not going to the gas tank and spending 10 times more on a gallon of gasoline. Once he's got you hooked on his electric vehicles, now with the smart meters, he can start selling you other products. He's got Sherwin-Williams. He's got a whole host of companies. The smart grid, a little longer term here. Remember, I said it's an internet channel. It becomes a consumer channel, a sales and marketing channel. The smart meter in your home will know a lot about your habits. It will know if you spend a lot of time in the kitchen. Oh, wait a second. Would you like a special deal on a refrigerator from one of Warren's companies? That kind of sales and marketing acumen, which Warren brings to the party, is what I think is going to explode within 5 years or less. I think the first step that investors will see will be when Warren picks up a couple of 3 electric utilities and starts to group them. In my book, he will go after Portland General Electric and Avista Corp in the Pacific Northwest. He will do this. They're contiguous. They're also very green-oriented customers who will buy into this concept very naturally. I think he will start fielding a fiefdom, if you will, of utilities. I have been told by the likes of Accenture and other folks who know what they're talking about that the whole electric utility industry is going to be reorganized. You will see them either become smart or simply stay dumb. You will see, and here comes a kicker, you will see Microsoft and Google and Apple buy electric utilities. Why? Because they see the smart grid as a second internet. They are going to become not just your energy provider, but your sales and marketing provider. Apple will sell you whatever you want based upon the habits that it records on the smart meter that you have displayed in your home.
You know, what's also fascinating about the Berkshire Hathaway story is that Mid-American Energy Holdings, the CEO of that is a guy named David Sokol, who you have interviewed, who's being talked about as the successor to Warren Buffett, as the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. And the person who introduced Warren Buffett is a protege of Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, and he is a gentleman named Li Lu, and he is Chinese, and he's the one who introduced them to BYD.
Sokol's been running Mid-America. Don't forget that.
Yes.
He's been running an electric utility. Sokol knows how to connect. I mean, we're just talking about connecting the transportation world with the electric world. I think what you're going to see Mr. Li do is make several more forays back into China in the green energy area. There are wind power companies, there are solar companies, there are battery companies. BYD is just one piece of a very big picture in China. He will be able to put together an entire array of green products, which he will then be able to bring into this country and sell to all of those green consumers who are hooked up via the smart grid. It goes even, so I mentioned Sherwin-Williams paint. It goes even to ordinary paint because they are starting through nanotechnology to incorporate microscopic solar cells into house paint. Quite literally, your house paint will be generating electricity.
Wow.
And you will be able to use that electricity right there on site, and it gets even more crazy. Any electricity that you don't use, you will be selling back to your utility and making money.
Love it. That sounds like a great idea. Investment opportunities. We just talked about Warren Buffett seeing the investment opportunities in the smart grid. So you have recently published a report on what companies that you have identified as takeover candidates.
Right.
20 companies, U.S. companies that are possible takeover candidates in the alternative energy space. Right. Tell us about a couple of them that you are most excited about.
All right, let's talk about a company called Maxwell Technologies. They make a product which, if you have heard of, I got a $1,000 bill in my pocket. It's called ultracapacitors, aka ultracaps. What are ultracaps? They give the vroom to an electric vehicle. Electric vehicles are great at holding a charge. They're a great gas tank. They don't do diddly to give you quick pickup when you want to charge. For that, you need an ultracap. Maxwell Technologies pretty much has that feel to itself right now, believe it or not. And in addition to the electric transportation side, ultracaps are also going to become an essential component of the smart grid infrastructure, because we're going to have so much more rapid drawdowns of power. This is jargon in the utility industry, but your utilities are going to see a lot of power suddenly getting sucked out of the system by cars and other things. And that, again, will require an ultracapacitor up in the transformer, which those little round boxes you see at the tops of the poles, to keep the system stable. So they've got two great markets. Maxwell has two great markets. It's a company which, unless you kind of understand this, you don't really get. I don't think Wall Street quite gets Maxwell yet.
Which is a good thing.
It's
so
a good
far.
thing, especially for your viewers, because, and again, let me hasten to add, viewers of this show have to do a lot of their own homework. You're not going to find anybody on Wall Street who's going to be able to pick up a phone and say, oh yeah, I know all about this. They may know about some solar, they may know about some wind, but it's essentially a much bigger universe, as you and I have been talking about.
And these are also small, a lot of these are smaller companies, they're traded on the NASDAQ,
Correct.
whatever. And solar, you told me you would not invest in solar energy.
Correct.
Except with one exception. But first of all, why wouldn't you invest in solar today?
Well, let's give an example that happened in August. Everybody's delight, First Solar, had gotten a contract to build what would be the world's largest solar power plant in China. A huge solar, the equivalent of 2 or 3 nukes.
Sounds like a great deal.
Yes, it ain't going to happen, because the Chinese government said, oh wait, we didn't let the Chinese companies bid on this. Contract pulled out from underneath. That's one problem that you have with solar, is government interference, if you will. So many of the solar guys are dependent upon regulations which seem to be in flux. In addition, though, however, my real concern about solar is the technology still just isn't there yet. It has not yet come of age. The head of the Italian utility, Enel, has said, I'm still waiting. I don't see the right technology for me. He's dabbling in solar, but he wants something that's lower cost, more efficient. We are on a track so that within 4 or 5 years, solar will be a fantastic investment. But I wouldn't touch it today, because today's winners are tomorrow's losers.
Bill Paul, independent energy analyst and consultant, thank you so much for joining us on WealthTrack.
Thank you.
As Bill makes clear, patience is a virtue when it comes to clean energy. Our action point for you this week is to consider a small alternative energy investment. Bill doesn't like most of the sector's ETFs or mutual funds because they are either too focused on one technology or too U.S. focused. He does recommend one ETF, however. It's PowerShare's Global Clean Energy Portfolio, which he likes because of its global scope and pure clean energy focus, as well as its manager, Josh Landis. I hope you can join us next week for another Financial Thought Leader interview. I'll be talking to British historian Neil Ferguson, whose latest fascinating book is going to be published later this year. It's called Civilization, the West and the Rest, and it's about the ebbing of Western power after 500 years of global dominance. I'll ask him what it means for investors. Until then, if you wish to watch this program again, please go to our website, wealthtrack.com, to see it as a podcast or streaming video. Thank you so much for watching, and make the week ahead a profitable and a productive one.
Additional funding provided by Loomis Sales, investors seeking exceptional opportunities globally. Research Affiliates, an efficient index for an inefficient market. Wintergreen, your home for global value. Rosalind P. Walter and the Dreamin' Foundation.